Окей. Окей. Хорошо.
Make concerted commitments to take on the biggest challenges our world faces. And now we've established a clear basis on how we intend to deal with Russia and the U.S.-Russia relationship. There's much more work ahead. I'm not suggesting that any of this is done. We've gotten a lot of business done in this trip. And before I take your questions, I want to say one last thing. Folks, look, this is about how we move from here. I listened to, again, a significant portion of what President Putin's press conference was. As he pointed out, this is about practical, straightforward, no-nonsense decisions that we have to make or not make. We'll find out within the next 6 months to a year whether or not we actually have a strategic dialogue that matters. We'll find out whether we work to deal with everything from release of people in Russian prisons. We'll find out whether we have a cybersecurity arrangement that begins to bring some order. Because look, the countries that most are likely to be damaged by failure to do that are the major countries. For example, when I talked about the pipeline that cyber hit for $5 million ransomware to the United States, I looked at him and I said, how would you feel if ransomware took on the pipelines from your oil fields? He said, it would matter. This is not about just our self-interest. It's about mutual self-interest. I'll take your questions, and as usual, folks, they gave me a list of people I'm going to call on. So, Jonathan, Associate.
Accepted no responsibility for any misbehavior. Your predecessor opted not to demand and stop these disruptions. So what is something that concrete, sir, that you achieved today to prevent that from happening again? What were the consequences you threatened?
Whether I stopped it from happening again, who knows that I will take action, like we did when this last time. What happened was, we in fact made it clear that we were not going to continue to allow this to go on. The end result was, we ended up throwing ambassadors. On conference matters to him, and other organizations. His credibility worldwide shrinks. Let's get this straight. How do you be desperately trying to make sure it maintains its standing as a major world power? And so it's not just what I do, it's what the actions that other countries take, in this case Russia, that are contrary to international norms. It's the price they pay. They are not able to dictate what happens. I made it clear to him that I believe that the consequences of that would be devastating for Russia. Go back to the same point. What do you think happens when he's saying it's not about hurting and bombing? It's all the stuff he says. President of Syria. I said because it's a violation of international norm. It's called a chemical weapons treaty. It can't be trusted. It's about trust. It's about their ability to influence other nations in a positive way. Look, would you like to trade our economy for Russia's economy? Would you like to trade? And by the way, we talked about trade. I don't have any problem doing business with Russia as long as they do it based on international norms. It's in our interest to see the Russian people do economically. I don't have a problem with that. But if they do not act according to international norms, then guess what? That won't happen with us. It will not happen with other nations. And he kind of talked about that, didn't he? about how the need to reach out to other countries to invest in Russia? They won't, as long as they are convinced that, in fact, the violations, for example, the American businessman who was in house arrest, and I pointed out, you want to get American business to invest, let them go. Change the dynamic. Because American businessmen, they're not ready to show up. They don't want to hang around in Moscow. Look, guys, I know we make foreign policy out to be this great, great skill, and somehow it's sort of like a secret code. All foreign policies is a logical extension of personal relationships. It's the way human nature functions. And understand, when you run a country that does not abide by international norms, and yet you need those international norms to be somehow managed so that you can participate in the benefits that flow from that, it hurts you. That's not a satisfying answer. Biden said he'd invade Russia. By the way, that was a joke. That's not true. But my generic point is, it's more complicated. David Sanger. There.
Thank you, Mr. President. In the run-up to this discussion, there's been a lot of talk about the two countries spilling down into a Cold War. And I'm wondering if there was anything that you emerged from the discussion that made you think that anything that would make you think that Mr. Putin has decided to move away from his fundamental role as a disruptor, particularly a disruptor of NATO and the United States. And if I could also just follow up on your description of how you gave him a list of critical infrastructure in the United States, did you lay out very clearly what it was that the penalty would be for interfering in that critical infrastructure? Did you leave that vague? Did you respond in any way to it?
Let me answer the first one. I'll answer the second question. I pointed out to him we have significant cyber capability. He knows it. Doesn't know exactly what it is. It's significant. In fact, they violate his basic norms, we will respond. Cyber. He knows. On the cyber. Number two. I think that the last thing he wants now is a Cold War. Without quoting him, which I don't think is appropriate, let me ask you a rhetorical question. You've got a multi-thousand-mile border with China. China's moving ahead, hell-bent on elections, as they say, seeking to be the most powerful economy in the world, the largest, and the most powerful military. You're in a situation where your economy is struggling. You need to move it in a more aggressive way in terms of growing it. And I don't think he's looking for a Cold War with the United States. I don't think it's about, as I said to him, I said, your generation and mine are about 10 years apart. This is not a kumbaya moment, as we used to say back in the 60s in the United States, like, let's hug and love each other. But it's clearly not in anybody's interest. Your countries or mine, for us to be in a situation where we're in a new Cold War. And I truly believe he believes that. He understands it. But that does not mean he's ready to cold figure his ego, lay down his arms and say, come on, he's still, I believe, is concerned about being encircled. He still is concerned that we, in fact, are looking to take him down. So he still has those concerns. But I don't think they are the driving force of the kind of relations he's looking for with the United States. Jennifer Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. President. Is there a particular reason why the summit lasted only about 3 hours? We know you had maybe allotted 4 to 5 hours. Was there any reason it ran shorter? Also, President Putin said that there were no threats or scare tactics issued. Do you agree with that assessment that there were no threats or scare tactics?
Yeah.
And also, did you touch on Afghanistan and the safe withdrawal of troops?
Yes. Let me go back to the first part. The reason it didn't go longer is when the last time two heads of state have spent over 2 hours in direct conversation across the table, going into excruciating detail? You may know of time, I don't. I can't think of one. So we didn't need, as we got through, when we brought in the larger group, our defense, our intelligence, and my foreign minister, my secretary of state was with me the whole time, our ambassador, etc., brought everybody in. We had covered so much, and so there was a summary done by him and by me of what we covered. Lavrov and Lincoln talked about what we covered. We raised things that required more amplification or make sure we didn't have any misunderstandings. And so it was kind of after 2 hours there, we looked at each other like, okay, what next? What is going to happen next? We're going to be able to look back, look ahead in 3 to 6 months and say, did the things we agreed to sit down and try to work out, did it work? Are we closer to a major strategic stability talks and progress? Are we further along in terms of the downline? That's going to be the test. I'm not sitting here saying because the President and I agreed that we'll do these things that all of a sudden it's going to work. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is I think there's a genuine prospect to significantly improve the relations between our two countries without us giving up a single solitary thing based on principle and our values. No, there were no threats. There were, as a matter of fact, I heard he quoted my mom and quoted other people today. It was very, as we say, which will shock you coming from me, somewhat colloquial. And we talked about basic fundamental things. And you know how I am. I explain things based on a personal basis. What happens if, for example. And so there were no threats, just simple assertions made, and no, well, if you do that, then we'll do this, with anything I saw. Just letting him know where I stood, what I thought we could accomplish together, and what, in fact, if there were violations of American sovereignty, what we would do. He asked us about Afghanistan. He said that he hopes that we're able to maintain some peace and security, and I said that has a lot to do with you. He indicated that he was prepared to, quote, help on Afghanistan. I won't go into detail now, and help on Iran, and help on, and in return we told him about what we wanted to do relative to bringing some stability and economic security, or physical security to the people of Syria and Libya. So we had those discussions. Yamiche.
Thanks so much, Mr. President. You say that you didn't issue any threats. Were there any ultimatums made when it comes to ransomware? And how will you measure success, especially when it comes to these working groups on Russian meddling and on cybersecurity?
Well, it's going to be real easy. They either, for example, on cybersecurity, are we going to work out where they take action against some ransomware criminals on Russian territory? They didn't do it. I don't think they planned it in this case. And are they going to act? We'll find out. Will we commit? What can we commit to act in terms of anything affecting, violating international norms that negatively affects Russia? What are we going to agree to? And so I think we have real opportunities to move. And I think that one of the things that I noticed when we had the larger meeting is that people who are very, very well informed started thinking, this could be a real problem. What happens if that ransomware outfit were sitting in Florida or Maine and took action, as I said, on their single lifeline to their economy, oil? It'd be devastating. And they're like, you can see them kind of go, not we do that, but like, whoa. So it's in everybody's interest in these things to be active. We'll see, though, what happens when these groups are put together. Third one, yes, go ahead.
Mr. President, when President Putin was questioned today about human rights, he said the reason why he's cracking down on opposition leaders is because he doesn't doesn't want something like January 6th to happen in Russia. And he also said he doesn't want to see groups formed like Black Lives Matter. What's your response to that, please?
My response is kind of what I communicated, but I think that's a ridiculous comparison. It's one thing for literally criminals to break through the window of the Capitol, kill a police officer, and be held unaccountable. And it is for people objecting and marching on the Capitol and saying, you are not allowing me to speak freely. You are not allowing me to do A, B, C, or D. And so they're very different criteria. Steve Holland.
President Putin said he was satisfied with the answer about your comment about him being a killer. Could you give us your side on this? What did you tell him?
He's satisfied. I would have made up that.
Do you believe you can trust him?
Look, this is not about trust. This is about self-interest and verification of self-interest. That's what it's about. So I virtually almost anyone that I would work out an agreement with that affected the American people's interest, I don't say, well, I trust you, no problem. Let's see what happens. You know, as that old expression goes, the proof of the pudding's in the eating. We're going to know shortly. Igor, Radio Free Europe or Radio Liberty? Hello, Mr. Want to go on the shade? You can't. Can you see?
So I think you know Alex in civil society and the free press continue inside Russia.
Yes.
For example, Radio Free Europe,
Yes.
Radio Liberty, Voice of America, Karen Time TV channel where I work, branded foreign agents, and several other independent media. So, we are essentially being forced out in Russia 30 years after President Yeltsin invited us in. My question is, after your talks with President Putin, how interested do you think he's in improving the media climate in Russia?
I wouldn't put it that way, in terms of improving the climate. I would, in fact, put it in terms of how much interest does he have in burnishing Russia's reputation that is not viewed as not being contrary to democratic principles of free speech. That's a judgment I cannot make. I don't know. But it's not because I think he's interested in changing the nature of a closed society, closed government's actions relative to what he thinks is the right of government to do what it does. It's a very different approach. You know, there's a couple of really good biographies. I told him I read most everything he's written and the speeches he's made, and I've read a couple of very good biographies, which many of you have as well. And I think I pointed out to him that Russia had an opportunity, a brief shining moment after Gorbachev and after things began to change drastically to actually generate a democratic government. But what happened was it failed, and there was a great race among Russian intellectuals to determine what form of government would they choose and how would they choose it. And based on what I believe Mr. Putin decided was that Russia has always been a major international power when it's been totally united as a Russian state, not based on ideology, whether it was going back to Tsar and Commissar, straight through to the revolution, the Russian Revolution, and to where they are today. And I think that it's clear to me, and I've said it, that I think he decided that the way for Russia to be able to sustain itself as its great, quote, great power is to, in fact, unite the Russian people on just the strength of the government controls, not necessarily ideologically, but the government. And I think that's the choice that was made. I think I'm not going to second guess whether could have been fundamentally different. But I do think it does not lend itself to Russia maintaining itself as one of the great powers of the world.
Today, did you, in terms of the red lines that you laid down, is military response an option for a ransomware attack? And President Putin had called you in his press conference an experienced person. You famously told him he didn't have a soul. Do you now have a deeper understanding of him after this meeting?
Thank you very much.
But on the military response?
No, we didn't talk about military response.
Dialogue, and also with what you said at NATO, that the biggest problems right now are Russia and China. You've spoken many times about how you have spent perhaps more time with President Xi than any other world leader. So is there going to become a time where you might call him old friend to old friend and ask him to open up China to the World Health Organization investigators who are trying to get to the bottom of COVID-19?
Let's get something straight. We know each other well, we're not old friends. It's just pure business.
So I guess my question would be, you said that you were going to press China. You signed on to the G7 communique that said the G7 were calling on China to open up, to let the investigators in. But China basically says they don't want to be interfered with anymore. So what happens now?
The impact, the world's attitude toward China as it develops. China's trying very hard to project itself as a responsible and very, very forthcoming nation. They are trying very hard to talk about how they're taking and helping the world in terms of COVID-19, vaccines. They're trying very hard. Look, certain things you don't have to explain to the people of the world. I see the results. Is China really actually trying to get to the bottom of this? One thing we did discuss, as I told you, in the EU and at the G7 and with NATO. What we should be doing, and what I'm going to make an effort to do, is rallying the world to work on what is going to be the physical mechanism available to detect early on the next pandemic and have a mechanism by which we can respond to it and respond to it early. It's going to happen. We need to do that. Thank you.
Okay, yaxşı, davay, elə ginən, elə dayandı kardan, davay, elə. Dayandı, elə ginən, elə başda. Amma tez qutar ki, mən 45 dəqiqəyə, yarım saat hızlı bitir. Davay, sağ ol.